So I'd like to call this meeting of the Lane County Board of Health to order. And the first item of business is adjustments to the agenda for the Board of Health. Any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comment for the Board of Health. And I have one person signed up for the Board of Health, and that's David Piccioni. And if you'll state your name, and I'll give you your 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is David Ivan Piccioni. I'm from Eugene, and I want to just talk about the single subject impediment that has been put in the way of our progress regarding stopping aerial spraying and having our communities be able to make decisions instead of having to rely, instead of having to be forced to do what the state or the federal government want. The reason why I think the things that are being proposed, that are being judged now by Judge Rasmussen, is that all these things are single subject. Anything that has to do with us surviving and us being able to live and not be poisoned, they're all single subject. If we want to manage to survive and not be killed by the herbicides and pesticides, to me it's very clear that the environmental concerns of any kind of nature are all connected. They're not just connected for humans, but for the rest of the plants and animals that live in this planet. Yeah, I looked up in the internet, what is if plants and humans have a lot of similarities in their genetic makeup, and it said that both plants and humans evolved from a eukaryotic cell, a single-celled organism that got added more cells to it and had some of their cells specialize in different things. So we do have a lot in common with plants regarding the way the body works and the way the plant's organism grows too. So I think that if we have so much in common, and we should be really careful about what we want to do with things that kill plants, because there is in my opinion, if they're not good for plants and we have so much in common with plants, it's probably not so good for us either. It would be dangerous. And we all need the environment. You guys need it just as anybody else. So why are you going to go to the bathroom where you eat, Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks. That's everyone I have signed up for public comment for the Board of Health. Any commissioner's response to public comment and or other issues or remonstrance for the Board of Health? Seeing none, then I'll ask if there's any emergency business for the Board of Health.
No.
No emergency business. Then we'll move on to Order 1804-1001 in the matter of announcing and issuing the annual Excellence in Public Health Awards. And we have Aaron Gaffney, our Director of Health and Human Services, and Jocelyn Warren, our Lane County Public Health Manager. So,
good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners, and happy National Public Health Week. We actually concluded those activities last week, and it's with great pleasure that we're here to honor some specific contributors in our community toward public health. Before we introduce those award recipients, I did want to take a moment. I left a little bit of bling for each of you at your places. 5 of our bookmarks that we produced for National Public Health Week this year. Thank you, yes. As reminders of some of the core functions for public health in the community. Certainly we celebrate that during National Public Health Week, but we execute on that all year long. We had an opportunity to spend some time at the Springfield Public Library doing outreach to the community and distributing these bookmarks there, and had a number of other activities throughout the week. And I guess as I segue over to Jocelyn to talk about our nominees today, I would point out in particular the bookmark that talks about creating healthier communities, health promotion and prevention. I know as a Board of Health, you've talked a lot about that over the years, and it really is a core piece for us in terms of partnerships with the community, both with individuals and organizations that really enable us to improve health in the community. It's absolutely not possible for the health department to do that alone. It really is a collaborative effort with the community. So it's a pleasure today to be able to recognize a couple of those partners that we have in the community.
Great, thank you. I'll tell you just a little bit about the process. This is the second year that we've done our Excellence in Public Health Awards in conjunction with the Board of Health, and we really do appreciate that opportunity. Our staff make nominations for folks that they have worked with in the community or that have made a significant difference in the public health system functioning. And this year we have 2 winners, 1 organization and 1 individual. The individual is Anna Marie Dudley, and many of you are already familiar with her because she seems to know just about everybody in Lane County. Her smiling face is well known to families in Cottage Grove for sure, and service providers throughout the county. She has worked for over 20 years providing support and doing whatever needs to be done at the Family Resource Center. In her current role with Peace Health as the certified community health worker interpreter, Anna Maria continues to be critical to public health's outreach efforts with Latino families and others in the community as well. So we very much thank Anna Maria Dudley for all of her years of supporting families in our community. Our other winner is Cahoots, and I'm sure many of you are also very well familiar with Cahoots. It stands for, and I'm sure you probably know this, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. It's a program within White Bird. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the white vans. If you live in the urban core of Eugene Springfield, you've seen the vans on the street for sure. They fill a very unique and critical function within our local public health system as behavioral health first responders. If you've seen the vans, maybe you've also seen them in action, and if you have, you know that they're very caring and capable people. We've also had the pleasure in public health of having trainings in crisis response from Cahoots, which have been very well received and appreciated by staff. Here today to receive the award on behalf of Cahoots is Tim Black and Miles Mabray. Did I pronounce that correctly? Excellent. He's the executive coordinator. So I want to thank both of our award winners and express how much we appreciate their contributions to public health.
And Chair Bozovich, before we turn it back to you, I wanted to add a personal note, in particular with Anna Maria. As Jocelyn said, it seems like everyone knows Anna Maria. We were reflecting when we first met, probably 1993, when I was working over at Youth Services on a substance abuse prevention grant back in the day. Anna Maria stepped forward to help us in our work in Cottage Grove and be that community organizer. So she was reflecting that her first job was actually with Lane County as an extra help employee, helping us do outreach in the community in Cottage Grove and really stand up Trabajando Juntos, which was our effort specifically targeted at the Latino community in Cottage Grove for that grant. So Anna Maria has been making contributions to the public health work in the community for decades. So we'll turn it back to you.
So any comments from the board? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for recognizing one of the best citizens in Cottage Grove. I have worked with Anna Maria for a number of years in a variety of ways. We currently share opportunities to serve on the Bohemia Foundation together, and she has been a great asset with that organization. And I couldn't be happier with you receiving this recognition. I think this is just absolutely incredible, and I'm very happy for you. It's well deserved, and Cottage Grove is very proud of you. So thank you.
Pat?
Thank you. And you know, we give so few awards, and so many people deserve them. But it's really great to see when you recognize members of staff. But I'd like to say a few words about Cahoots at this point in time. You know, I wear this purple ribbon right here, and this purple ribbon is for Chloe Wilson, who committed suicide in March. I just want to throw out a thank you to Cahoots. The parents of Chloe, the day that happened, the day that they discovered Chloe, you all reached out to them, and you really eased their burden that day. They made specific mention of Cahoots, that you were there in their home, that you took care of issues for them, and really saw them through what is absolutely the most difficult time in their lives. So that's what you guys do. You guys do that every single day, and that's just one incident that I'm calling out, but it's one that really touched the hearts of a couple of parents who were racked with grief that particular day. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that these awards are being made today. I don't know much about the situation in Cottage Grove, but just hearing the amount of praise and that you've been working in the communities for so long, it really is really great, not only for the Cottage Grove area, but everybody in Lane County to hear that kind of dedication. I think on the Cahoots van and the people that work in that van and help the people, I know that being it's throughout our community, and it's really saved a lot of lives. It really helps people in a very humane way. I think when it first started out, it was kind of, the police Cahoots relationship wasn't nearly as positive as it is now, and that I think now everyone has recognized the importance of both the role of the police and the Cahoots in making the community safer. And I certainly think that there have been many, many instances where I have personally had constituents that have been really helped by Cahoots, and that's people on the streets, that's people concerned about people on the streets, that's the overall public safety that and humane treatment of people that I think is really a hallmark. So I just want to give a shout out to you guys too.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ana Maria, you need to know that as the former mayor of the city of Springfield, working with my colleague, the former mayor of the city of Cottage Grove, he's been singing your praises for years. And so a lot of us around the state, different mayors, actually got to know who you were without actually ever meeting you. So your reputation precedes you, just so you know. And so I'm so pleased when Gary immediately said, "Oh, I'm going to speak to this immediately." I'm not surprised. So it's great to put a face to the person that then Mayor Williams was talking about all those years, and so it's pretty exciting. And to Cahoots, I just want to say, a couple years ago, I remember watching your van, for lack of a better word, in action, and I just want to say, your folks are so compassionate, and because it's really it can be a challenging time, I think, for somebody, and it's probably maybe an embarrassing time as well for that individual. But I want to say your staff is so compassionate. I was really, really impressed. And I just wanted to say thank you for what you do in the community. And I think both these awards so well deserved. And to Cahoots and to Ana Maria, thank you very much for what you do for us in this community.
So before I go down and do the shake hands and photo op thing, I want to just say a couple things. And one is, both of these awardees, even though there's tons of deserving folks out in the community that are helping us with our public health mission, but these two awardees represent two major aspects of our strategic plan and our community health improvement plan. And Ana Maria, you really represent our focus on access and equity and getting people into the system and meeting them in a culturally appropriate way. Your outreach has been fantastic, and it's one of the values that this board, as sitting as the Board of Health, has adopted, and our staff has promoted, is having that access out there, and that's such an important thing. We can't be healthy unless we have access to the knowledge base of our public health professionals and to our primary care system And you're really that doorway for a lot of people, and I really appreciate that, and a safe doorway for them. Cahoots, you really represent a piece where we've been trying to divert people that have mental health problems away from our criminal justice system. And we adopted the Stepping Up Initiative, which is a National Association of Counties initiative to try and divert people out of the criminal justice system that have mental health issues. We've done multiple things in that area where we added the 3 behavioral health staff in our jail. We've opened up a 23-hour, quote, clinic for crisis and getting people stabilized. But you all are the feeder to a lot of our system. And the point of diversion that really is the best point of diversion is when that person's in crisis, rather than having a law enforcement response to that crisis, we have mental health professional and physical health professional responding to that crisis. And it's one of the reasons why there's been such support of this board, budget-wise, through the Public Safety Coordinating Council and through the Human Services Commission, to expand your services. And it's a model I think the rest of the country could look to, is that's really who should be responding to those folks, is not the law enforcement. It should really be the mental health professional. So I really appreciate both these organizations so much, and so well deserving. And before I jump up from my seat, what I'm going to ask is if somebody would like to make a motion on Order 1804-1001. Commissioner Williams?
I would move that.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Lycan. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously, so it's official. I can go and hand out the awards. So we'll take a brief recess from business while I walk around the podium here and we do the photo op thing. So bear with me. And straighten your ties because you'll be in the background. See if we can find the right one. Oh, look at that. That's Cahoots.
I'll take theirs.
Grab the
They do
wrong one.
great work.
50-50 chance and I didn't get it right. So thank you very much for your service to this community. Really, very appreciative.
You know, thank you, Jocelyn.
Who do we want to put? Who do you want in the photo here? Because this is the more official one. All right.
Say hello to Brenton Gicker for me, please.
Sometimes it's fun to be a commissioner and fun to be the chair, too. So is there any other business for the Board of Health this morning? Seeing and hearing none, I'm going to adjourn the Board of Health meeting, and I'm going to convene the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, April 10th.
Mr. Chair, one item really quickly. I see Dr. Tim Beyer leaving. Dr. Beyer, thank you for being here this morning for the Board of Health meeting. Dr. Beyer is on the Public Health Advisory Committee.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see him in the audience. Thank you for recognizing him, Pat. So we're convening the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. And the first item of business is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comment. And we have one person signed up for public comment, and that is David Tveit. And I think I finally pronounced it correctly, David. So go ahead and introduce yourself, and I'll start your 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is David Tveit, and I live in Pat Farr's district in unincorporated Lane County in the River Road area. Commissioner Bozovich, you submitted a response to a letter to the editor about forestry spraying that was published in the Register Guard on May 15, 2016. This is what you said. There has not been scientific evidence of chemical trespass or any health effects at this time from aerial application of herbicides in forest practices. There have been a couple of direct exposure incidents where the applicator has been found negligent and subsequently fined and punished. Advanced drop technology eliminates drift, and current regulations only allow 2 applications of herbicides on commercial timber during the growth cycle of 40 to 60 years. Aerial spray is not a major threat, end quote. The only thing that is true in your response about this is the direct exposure incidences. Everything else that you said comes across as simply regurgitating the timber industry's propaganda with some airs. I found your comments very offensive and want to respond to several of your claims. Advanced drop technology cannot eliminate drift like you claim. It just helps reduce it. The Oregon Supreme Court ruled in 1961 that aerial application of pesticides is an ultra-hazardous activity, and improved drop size technology that's happened since then in no way makes it a non-hazardous activity. Industrial clear cuts regularly get 3 to 4 applications of herbicides, and rotations are usually 30 to 50 years on industrial forest lands. There is a growing body of scientific evidence for chemical trespass and health damage from aerial spraying of herbicides, but you don't even seem to want to know about it. You show callous disregard to your chemically trespassed and poisoned West Lane voters and residents as you take on a lot of timber industry money for your re-election campaign. I have a question for you, Commissioner Bozovich. When I was collecting signatures for our initiative outside the Lane County Event Center a while back, you came by. When I asked you if you were a Lane County voter and told you what our initiative was about, you laughed, and I heard you tell me that we're, as in we are, actually trying to stop it. I knew who you were. I just wanted to hear your response. Now, if I somehow misheard you, please correct what your response actually was. Otherwise, I have a question for you. Who is the we in your response about? And who is the we that you're talking about that's trying to stop our initiative? Were you referring to your timber industry masters who are donating heavily to your re-election campaign? I would like an answer.
Thank you. That's the only person we had signed up for public comment today. Is there anyone else that wants to address the board? Seeing and hearing none, move on to Commissioner's response to public comment and or other issues or remonstrance. Any comments from the board this morning? Then we'll move on to emergency business. Any emergency business this morning?
We have employee recognition.
Oh, employee recognition. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong agenda. Employee recognition, then, I believe we have a couple folks from assessment taxation. We have our assessor, Mike Coles.
Up here, and we have a number of guests here from assessment and taxation. Morning, Mike.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Assessment taxation has a staff that is just great as far as, so it's really hard to acknowledge and bring up just 3 employees, but we've had recently correspondence from taxpayers that I just wanted to point out to the commissioners and the public of what a great job our staff is currently doing. And there's 3 employees that I particularly wanted to mention. First is Faith Bowlesby. Faith is a property appraiser 3. She handles our appeal support for BOPTA, which is not an easy job. She is a utility appraiser in that she's pretty much fits in where she's needed in a commercial appraiser or residential appraisal work or sales data. The other is a senior office assistant, Becky Smith. Becky handles our farm and forest special assessment programs. which again is not an easy job to do. Sarah Canale is the third employee. She's a property appraiser too, who does residential work and also backup for BOPTA appeals. And one thing I wanted to point out is Faith's been here 8 years for assessment taxation. Becky's been here 17 years for assessment taxation, and Sarah Canale has been here 11 years. So quite a long tenure with assessment taxation. So that said, I wanted to just quickly read 2 letters. I'll try to paraphrase them.
Do you want to invite?
That sounds great.
The employees up and then read the. So do you want to do? Let's do Faith first.
Faith, come on up.
Do you want to do this one, Mike? Sure.
My reading glasses on here. My eyes are getting kind of. This letter is addressed to Tara Smith, our appraisal manager, who is also back in the audience. Dear Ms. Smith, during the last 2 years, my property taxes have increased significantly. As a result, I felt the need to find out exactly why this has happened, and when, by whom, and how much tax increases were calculated. I therefore called the Lane County Assessor's Line and talked to Faith in your office. I was pleasantly surprised that instead of telling me just to call another number or just letting me feel that she is too busy to take the time for me, she patiently and intelligently answered all my questions and explained everything I wished to understand. She even contacted a coworker to ask to provide me a number that I needed. Nowadays, such sincere readiness to help is certainly not the norm. Faith is doing much more than most others would have done in her place. Based on my single interaction with her, I would nevertheless conclude that Faith is an exceptional county employee and hope that you will commend her on the good work she is doing. I trust that you will do not consider this letter as an intrusion. Instead, please regard it as my attempt to help you recognize merit where it may be otherwise overlooked. Sincerely, Paul Kasanka.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add that Faith has been actively involved in our equity work, representing assessment and taxation. She's helped to facilitate sessions at our twice-a-year equity summits that we do, and been an active participant in our equity and education committee, representing departments from throughout the organization, promoting our equity work. And I also want to ask, we have a budget, we're kicking off our budget here pretty soon, and I always talk about property taxes, and we did a nice little dollar, it says about 11%, 11 cents of each property tax dollar goes to Lane County, the rest goes to other taxing districts. I'm wondering maybe if you want to come and do that presentation, since you did such a great job here explaining it to.
You're talking to Mike, right?
No, I'm sorry. Well, we get that question a lot. I actually spoke yesterday to a group of CEOs in this area from Lane County, and they were confused about that, but everyone pays their property taxes to Lane County, and many people think all of that money goes to Lane County. The reality is a small portion of it does, but we have that responsibility both for assessing property and for collecting taxes and then distributing it to all those entities. So assessment and taxation gets these types of questions, and it's just, I'm continually impressed by the outstanding work that you and your team do, Mike, in assessment and taxation, and answering those questions and dealing with folks in a very calm and respectful manner. And this Faith is just a wonderful example of that great work that's provided out of assessment and taxation.
Thank you, Faith.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for all your hard work. So Becky Smith and Sarah Canale.
Morning.
Morning.
Again, Becky is our farm and forest appraiser. I've been with assessment taxation for quite a long time, and Sarah Canale is our residential and appeals backup appraiser.
Do you want to do it?
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I received this email, and these are like the best emails to get from residents and taxpayers praising staff. So this came to me from William and Deborah McCollum, who wrote both about Sarah and Rebecca and their work, and I'll read it. It says, "My wife and I have been helped out so much by Rebecca Smith and by Sarah Nicole Canale. Both are outstanding employees in every possible way. Rebecca Smith works in your property and tax management, farm and forest division, and has helped us with issues and challenges for the past year and a half and has been fantastic. Sarah Nicole Canale works as a registered appraiser and deals with many different public concerns, and she too has been a fantastic asset to us. They both deserve to be acknowledged for their amazing work with the public. Please take the time to thank them for us as well as many other residents in Lane County who we know they have helped." And this person says, "I'm a Lane County elected official from the Fern Ridge area. And these two employees are great representatives of and for Lane County." And I loved getting that email, and it takes a lot for residents and taxpayers to take the time to send an email to public officials thanking them. We oftentimes hear about complaints around issues that people have, but it takes a lot of effort for someone to actually praise the work of our great employees. And thank you so much for the great work that you do and for representing Lane County in such a high quality manner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now I can move on to emergency business.
You can. I'm going to do these, Mr. Chair, hand out these. We don't have any emergency business, and so I'll be back.
Okay, then we'll move on to the consent calendar while you are taking care of that back there, doing the photo thing. So consent calendar for today, Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. These are items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted in one motion in the form listed. There'll be no separate discussion of these items. If items were desired to be discussed, they would have been pulled during agenda setting at the beginning of, adjustments to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. So that brings us to Public Works, and we need to have Order 1804-1006 in the matter of setting a public hearing for the proposed surrender of a portion of Coast Guard Station Road and a portion of South Harbor Vista Road to the City of Florence. And we have Jay Blame here, our county surveyor. Welcome, Jay.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here this morning in the matter of setting a date for a public hearing for the proposed surrender of two roads that are located in the City of Florence. The City of Florence has requested that Lane County surrender a portion of South Harbor Vista Drive and Coast Guard Station Road. Both are located within the city limits of Florence. As required by ORS 373.270, it is required that a date for a public hearing be set to allow testimony to be entered into the public record. Our office would like to propose a date of May 22nd, 2018 at 1:30 p.m. time certain for the public hearing. This date will allow our office sufficient time to provide proper posting and notification in the timeframes required by law. At this time, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Any questions for staff? Just one quick one. Is this related to the sewer improvements to Harbor Vista?
South Harbor Vista Drive is located just south of that, but it's not really related to it, no.
Just curious. Trying to put it in my mental map, and it wasn't quite getting there. Okay, so is any further discussion or questions from the board? Somebody like to Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval Order 1804-1006 in the matter of setting a public hearing for the proposed surrender of a portion of Coast Guard Station Road, County Road number 65, and a portion of South Harbor Vista Drive, County Road number 1301 to the City of Florence, and setting this date for May 22nd, 2018, 1:30 p.m.
Second?
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to set the public hearing for May 22nd at a 1:30 p.m. time certain. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that gets us to item 8, assessment and taxation, and this is a matter of approving submission of the County Assessment Function Funding Assistance, known as the CAFA grant application to the Oregon Department of Revenue for fiscal year 18-19. And we have our assessor again, Mr. Coles.
Chair, Commissioners, I come here today, as you noted, to seek approval of the annual CAFA grant. The CAFA grant is an important funding mechanism for assessment taxation. I believe this is the 6th year that actually I've come to the Board of Commissioners now for approval of the CAFA grant. I was looking back, and boy, how time flies pretty quick. The CAFA grant allows assessment taxation to do its required functions by law. The CAFA, and I'll start out a little bit about the history, and I'm sure most of you probably know the history of the CAFA grant, but just for the sake of Commissioner Williams, the CAFA grant was created originally in 1989, and it was funded primarily by a $20 assessor processing fee on recorded documents. There was a number of other components back in '89. In 1999, it was actually made permanent, and the fees were reduced to $10 for the documents, and $10 and plus $1 per document. And there was also adjustments made at that time, I believe, for the interest rate adjustment for the 4% that actually is a spread between the interest that we pay for refunds and interest that we charge, 12% and 16%. In 2009, the fund was swept, approximately $5 million was swept out of the fund by the legislature, and thus, as I talk about the amount of CAFA grant and the percentage, you'll see that it used to be around 35-40% as far as of our budget. This year it's approximately 16-17% of our budget. And originally the legislature, I believe, promised, I believe they promised to fund assessment taxation funding, to fund assessment taxation functions around the state for all 36 counties. And now the primary funding for assessment taxation is the 3 components: the document recording fee, the interest spread on the 12 and 16% interest, and then earnings on those dollars. Over the years, again, that amount has fluctuated in percentage-wise, but this year's budget is approximately 16-17%. Lane County is a donor county in that the money we pay into the system is actually greater than the money we receive out. So every year we must submit a CAFA grant to the state of Oregon to receive our dollars back to Lane County. This year's budget for assessment taxation holds most positions stable. There is an addition of 1 property appraiser, 1 position, one-time funding for scanning microfiche and microfilm that is degrading, and ongoing scanning of the microfiche, microfilm, and also funding for a one-time deposit to eventually replace our software system that is becoming fairly old. We converted back in 1998, 99, and I remember writing the RFP back in 95, 96, so we've had it for quite a long time. there's a number of items as far as that we're looking forward to this upcoming year for assessment taxation. One item is that we're actively pursuing changing our vendor for online payments, which will allow for e-statements, electronic tax statements. It will reduce the fee for e-checks by 50% and also allow for a checkout system where property tax payers can actually have an account with the bill payer, and they'll remember the tax accounts that they pay each year, and they won't have to enter all the account numbers every year to make payments online. And that ultimately that saves the county and the taxing districts money by being more efficient and more effective by doing the e-statements and having more efficient processing online. I think that is about it, unless the commissioners have any questions.
Questions from the board? Don't have your annual statement about CAFA?
Well, I'm going to put the soapbox away for a year maybe. So.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, thank you very much for that review. I think one of the biggest mistakes I think people make about the legislative process is that, you know, a legislature in 1989, the idea that they can promise something that we were talking about in 2017, pretty low probability that those promises are enforceable or even really remembered. I think what we really should go by is what the law says. And I think we'd be better off, and maybe this is something that you and your fellow assessors can work on, is that I think we'd be better off if we had a simpler system whereby the cost of the real property assessment and taxation were to be recognized statewide, and it'd be a simpler process for funding it. And I realize that with some counties having 300,000 people and other counties having 2,000 people, that there's a wide difference in how it's done. And maybe we're at the point where the number of governments that we have, which started out to be maybe appropriate in the last time our county boundaries were changed, maybe that was a good decision at the time, but maybe there's been some changes, societal changes, technology changes, that do we really need 36 counties? Do we really need 200 something cities? I mean, seems like there's a lot of duplication there, and realizing that Oregonians love to have their own government in their wherever they are, I get that, but we also, I think, had these governments instituted because it didn't make sense to have a government so far away. Now the concept of far away is really an odd concept, because we're helping people do property taxes out in Eastern Oregon now, even though you and your staff are right here. So I don't know. I just, a few years ago, Senator Shields, Frank Shields from Multnomah County, introduced a bill to consolidate Oregon counties from 36 to 5. And I wrote him and said, hey, I really like working at the Lane County Courthouse. I know you created a new county that the headquarters of which would be in Albany. His bill also designated the county seats of the 5 counties. So our county, I forgot what it was called, was going to be headquartered in Albany, Oregon. So I called him up and said, hey, where'd you get this idea from anyway? He says, well, it was a middle school social studies project. And I said, okay, well, I don't think that bill's going too far. But, it is an idea that we might want to think about down the road. Do we really need all these governments? Couldn't we get some efficiency? I mean, aren't you working right now with assessors in other counties?
Yes, matter of fact, we have, the TS is working with East Oregon counties, and then we routinely work with District 1 counties.
Where are those District 1 counties?
Coos, Curry, Klamath. Actually, Klamath is another district, but they kind of seceded with our districts in District 1. Douglas County, Jackson, Josephine.
Yeah.
And we routinely work on projects such as the District 1 project that we completed 3 years ago now. And also, this upcoming year, I'll be president of OSACA, the Association of Assessors, and also this year being on the legislative committee for OSACA, I'll be more involved with the legislative changes and working with the Oregon Department of Revenue and other counties to make ideas such as the one you stated, potentially changes to make the system more effective and more efficient.
Do you think we'd be better off with a statewide system?
I think definitely with the statewide computer system. I wish there's 3 or 4 main computer systems that are in the counties throughout the state. As far as funding, definitely the Department of Revenue funded the computer systems rather than the counties, and it'd be much more effective and efficient and cost savings. Also, if the Department of Revenue had the funding that they used to have, because their funding has been cut also, to help the counties out in such as large appeals and other training and assistance. When I first started at the county, it was routine to have the Department of Revenue here to do reviews of our work once a year, and it's fairly rare that we see the Department of Revenue in the individual counties nowadays.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you answered the question I was going to ask, and just kind of a follow-up to see where you were with the Southwest counties and District 1 counties. And I just to refresh, and we worked, I was able to actually work directly with Governor Kitzhaber and his staff to kind of create this pilot. And it's interesting now as where you are today, in kind of off of what Commissioner Sorensen was mentioning, you know, it was Jim Johnson, the former county administrator here, was actually the person working with Portland State University who really helped with the counties to kind of focus on some projects that you could do together. So I'm really pleased to hear, Mike, that you continue that work with the very counties that we set up, which made sense because there's a lot of similarities, especially when you look at land and the appraisal and the work that you do. There's a lot of similarities involved. And I also think it's kind of funny that Senator Shields wanted to go to 5 counties, and then you go to a state like Iowa, much smaller than us. I think they have about like 100 counties. And I think Illinois has like 110 counties. I mean, there's so many counties in some of these other states where Oregon, for the size, I mean, I think land-wise, we're the 9th largest state in the country, something like that. We have only 36 counties because our counties are so big. And but some of these Midwestern states, you can practically walk, you know, and be from one county line to the next and walk and be there in less than a half hour. So it's kind of interesting to hear these concepts. But I'm really pleased to hear that you continue that work with what you call District 1, and I honestly believe this is where we'll continue to be going. I think that the collaboration, the work that so many of our counties do together, I think makes sense, and I think that's where things are going to continue to go. So great work on that. I'm glad to hear you're going to be president and start next year.
Starting this,
that's pretty exciting, and of course the relationship you have with Department of Revenue. You know, it is what it is, and that's why I'm not going to get on the CAFA soapbox this year. It is what it is, but I really appreciate your leadership at our assessment and taxation. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mike. I'm just going to take a second to commend you on the work that you've done since we first appointed you and you subsequently were elected county assessor. It's remarkable how much you do with what has been diminishing resources. And I know you lament quite often some of the things you feel that you could be doing had you more resources. No promises to be made or put forth there. But just a comment regarding Lane County's size compared to other counties. I think Fern Ridge Lake is bigger than some counties in Texas, but I'm looking at the 1853 state of Oregon map of Lane County, which had Lane County going from Osita Head through Boise, through Idaho Falls, into the western slopes of the Grand Tetons, of the Teton Mountains. So I'm glad we're not that big.
That would be quite a trek to do appraisal work on both sides of the county.
And we had one sheriff and no deputies at the time, so. So thank you, Mike, for the work you do.
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, it's been very gratifying since you have become assessor. The high caliber professionalism that you have brought, demonstrated earlier with the comments that we recognized people in your division for their excellence. You're also a national recipient of a good award in your field. You're a leader among leaders, and I really appreciate the fact that you are our assessor and have brought such a high degree of excellence to taxation and assessment.
Very much.
So I'll just say real quick that I appreciate the work that goes into putting together the CAFA grant every year, and it is not as much as we'd like it to be as far as our funding goes, which makes you guys have to do a pretty incredible job on a very tight budget with limited staff. And I you know, just have to say I hear all the time, you know, we get the calls, you know, why is my taxes going up and all that, and I generally get to refer them to you, and you guys get back to people really quickly, and I usually hear good things about that. So your department's doing great work. You know, the thing probably unrecognized is just the work we do for a lot of other agencies without any compensation. All the school districts, the fire districts, the ambulance districts, the, you know, even library districts, cities, everybody, you know, was it 82 other
taxing districts.
82 other. Does that count the extension? I thought we were 83 with the extension service.
83 with the extension at Lane County.
Yeah. So I kind of, well, there's sort of a separate service. But so, you know, all those organizations depend on your office to accurately appraise and then collect their taxes. And you don't charge them anything for that. And I think that's something that goes unrecognized as one of the things Lane County does as part of our mandate from the state as what our duties are. You know, we met as the Board of Health earlier as another mandated function of Lane County. But this collection of taxes and the assessment and taxation function we do for everybody that's inside Lane County, not just for Lane County proper. And that's why that tax bill gets confusing to people and they think it's all Lane County tax and only 11 cents of it is because we're mandated to collect taxes for those other 82 or 83, depending on how you count, organizations. And I just really appreciate the work you guys do, even though it's not compensated.
I always thought it would be some way to, when they write the check out, or instead of writing the check out to Lane County tax collector, somehow make it to some other type of, say, 83 taxing districts. Or so, I don't know. I was trying to think because they, just by writing the check, they assume it's all going to Lane County.
It'd almost be great if they could look on that part of their tax bill and have to write one check to each entity. You know, so they, you know, this check's going to the City of Eugene, this check's going to 4J, this check's going to Lane ESD, this check's going to Lane, yeah.
I wouldn't want to tell my accounting clerks that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be a bit confused, but it would actually make people see that that check that they write to Lane County is not near as big as some of the other checks they're writing. But yeah, I agree. Commissioner Sorensen.
Prior to the law that says the taxes are paid to the assessor, it was paid to the sheriff. And so every sheriff got the benefit and drawback of having their picture on the front page accepting the largest taxpayer contribution in the county from whatever taxpayer that was, but also got all the complaints about how come there's problems in funding the sheriff's office when I write my check to the actual sheriff. When I was a kid in Coos County, it was S. Tony Zarbano, Coos County Sheriff, and he got the taxes for all 60,000 residents of Coos County. I mean, that the sheriffs lobbied heavily to be relieved of that responsibility. So maybe we could have it made out to, like you said, the 83 taxing districts of Lane County. That might not be bad. Is there a requirement that it actually say that it's to Mike or to tax collector? Or I know in recent years I've seen my property taxes addressed to something like Lane County tax collector.
I'm not sure. Actually, I might look into that and take a
Yeah,
look.
yeah. I mean, I would be willing to, sponsor or vote for a county change to relieve you of that responsibility so that we could have the money go to the 83 taxing districts where it really goes anyway. Thanks.
Thanks. So we do have an order in front of us for approving submission of the County Assessment Function and Funding Assistance Grant. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Sorensen.
I'll move approval.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Sorensen, seconded by Commissioner Lyken to approve Order 180410-07. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Farr.
Just a question for the assessor. Have you ever actually said, let me tell you how it will be? There's one for you, 19 for me.
No.
John Lennon wrote those words.
Oh, yes. And we digress into the Beatles. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And that moves us on to county administration announcements. And I believe we've got a couple things here.
We do. I'm going to do a couple of brief announcements and then invite Mr. Kyler up here to have a little more in-depth discussion about the omnibus bill recently passed by Congress and signed by the president. A couple of things. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to meet with Merlin and Joe from El Rapa, and I just wanted the board to let the board know that they did receive the letter that was sent regarding the concerns that the board had about a recent action by the El Rapa board, and just wanted to share with the board that they understood the concerns, that there's, I know, ongoing work with the El Rapa board, and there's a meeting this Thursday, and I've shared that with Commissioner Bozovich, and we've talked a little bit about, you know, some potential remedies moving forward. But I just wanted the board to know that there was follow-up from El Rapa on that. They appreciated the board's comments, and they're interested in any potential changes, both in process and potential rules for the El Rapa board moving forward that would alleviate the concerns that were expressed in the board's letter. I also want to share with the board that we had 2 weeks ago on Friday, we did a County 101. I shared this with several of you individually, but we have several candidates running for county commission seats this year, and we were starting to get some questions from candidates on various issues, and we thought there would be value in inviting those all of the candidates in at the same time to meet with myself, Steve Dingle, County Counsel, and Christine Moody, our budget manager, to share just some basic information. So we did that 2 weeks ago. I forwarded the board an email that we followed up with those candidates yesterday with that was a response to a number of questions that were asked in that meeting that we didn't have direct answers to at the time, but we followed up with yesterday. So you have that information. There were 5 candidates there, and then one individual representing one of the candidates who could not be there. So 6 individuals represented, and appreciated the opportunity just to provide factual and objective information about Lane County finances, operations, services, and policies for those individuals running for office. And then finally, I mentioned earlier the opportunity yesterday that I had to speak to the Young Presidents Organization. It's a national group, and they have local chapters, but these are individuals who are young professionals who are CEOs of companies in our community, and it's really a great opportunity to speak to the CEOs of Pape, Lovett Plumbing, Mackenzie Soan, Justina Land and Timber, Oregon Taxi in Hop Valley, KPD Insurance, Digital Trends marketing firm out of Portland, the CEO of Snow Temp, the CEO of Coconut Bliss, the wonderful frozen dessert, and just had a lot of discussion about PERS, about health insurance, about labor negotiations and the recent strike that we had, about the work that the county's been doing to get its financial house in order, around the structure of our organization, around property taxes, and the breakdown of who gets what, around some of the history of Lane County's operations and finances. So just really a great opportunity to speak with a number of business leaders there. Really engaged group of folks who expressed their support and pleasure with the work that the county has been doing. So look forward to continuing some of those conversations. So that's all I had. Unless you have questions on those items, I'll invite Mr. Kyler up to talk in more specifics about an issue that I know the board is interested in learning more about what was in the omnibus bill recently passed by Congress. We have a handout here. Thanks.
Thank you.
How many pages was that bill?
3,000, I think. Yeah. Commissioners, Alex Kyler, your Intergovernmental Relations Manager. I've been asked to give you a bit of a summary on the what was officially termed HR, I think, 1965. It's the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. Really a pretty remarkable piece of legislation, particularly when compared to this funds the federal government now through September 30th of 2018. But particularly the funding levels are really dramatically increased over what the president had proposed in his budget for federal fiscal year 2018, and I think that's a good reminder that in both state and federal governments, and indeed probably local government too, when the executive proposes a budget, the elected body often makes some fairly significant changes to that document. This is a 3-page document that I took primarily from the National Association of Counties website, and I tried to sort of break it down into arenas of issue areas that Lane County is obviously pretty interested in. I will note that that NACO has that document on its website. It's available to look at. And also yesterday at the Association of Oregon Counties, during their steering committee meetings, the omnibus budget bill was also discussed in each of the steering committee meetings. And in the legislative committee handout, AOC compiled roughly 10 pages or so of breakdown about what's in the Omnibus Budget Act. So it's a little bit more detailed, I think, than what I put together, although comparing the two, I picked up some stuff that they didn't pick up as well. So I think this is without reading the entirety of the bill, the best we can rely on are these kinds of summaries. Given your earlier Board of Health meeting, I think it's important to note that public health actually fared quite well in the omnibus budget bill, particularly in the arena of funding for the opioid crisis. And so there's, throughout this, I've got some, shows some additional dollars under public health, but also in public safety. There's a series of Department of Justice grants that will also address the opioid epidemic. So quite a bit of spending increase in for opioids. You can see what I've tried to do is show how much money above federal fiscal year 17 is in the omnibus bill, and for the most part, all those numbers go up, with the exception on page 2 under Health and Human Services. It looks like WIC got funded somewhat below federal fiscal year 17, but I mean, it's just remarkable going through this document how much new money is available from the passage of the measure. A couple other high points I think to note. Secure Rural Schools obviously was funded at federal fiscal year 15 levels, less 5%. And there are some policy language in the bills that requiring those payments be made within 45 days of enactment. I think the other thing to note there is that sequestration should not apply because spending caps were actually increased in the measure. So the issues that we were facing previously with respect to sequestration of SRS dollars should not be an issue with these next two payments from SRS. Also, some additional policy language with respect to federal forest land management that I've noted under that section as well. I also wanted to note that for example, the Land and Water Conservation Fund was fully funded. That has been a topic at our United Front trips, particularly by Willamette Lane, for years and years. So there was a number of things that I noticed in the bill that really dovetail nicely with some of the conversations that we've had in DC over the years about funding for specific programs. Under infrastructure, I think there's some really neat opportunities. In particular, the Tiger Grant funding level was actually tripled, so from $500 million to $1.5 billion. And there's some language in that section of the bill that requires USDOT to move those dollars out relatively quickly as well. So we should be seeing the actual funding announcement sometime in May for the next Tiger program. We actually, yesterday we had the Federal Affairs Manager for ODOT present at AOC, and he was pretty excited by this new bridge bundling program, which is at the very top of page 2. Notably, this is a program that's only available to rural states. So the metric there is for states with less than 100 people per square mile. Oregon has 39, so we definitely qualify. But again, this omnibus budget bill has a number of programs that are focused on rural communities and making sure that this rural-urban divide is minimized to the extent possible. Further in that section, you'll see new money for water and wastewater, as well as brownfields and broadband projects. I think all of those have been important issues for the county. A lot of new money for housing and homelessness. Great new dollars for community economic and workforce development. Particularly workforce development. I think there's a number of new opportunities for supporting job creation and specific kinds of training and programs. For example, an expansion on how some of the loan forgiveness programs for healthcare providers have been expanded. So used to be that those programs were only available for folks who are doing specific, like primary care. Some of that's been expanded for drug treatment services as well, so that people who are carrying those kinds of student loans can actually have them forgiven in a broader range of professions now. I think the other ones that I wanted to focus on a little bit on veterans, some new resources for veterans, and then finally justice and public safety, new dollars for drug courts and veteran courts that I think are important for the county. There's a series of dollars that are available for public safety that are on hold for the moment that I think is worth noting. And there's a piece of litigation that exists around sanctuary cities that is particular to the city of Chicago. And the Department of Justice has put a hold on some of these allocations of these particular funds, including the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program and the Byrne Memorial Justice Grants, until those until that litigation is settled. So that's a little bit of a note there to for a delay in some of the public safety money. You know, I think what we've talked about administratively is that this bill does represent, you know, a huge new opportunity for the county. Many of these dollars are going to come either through allocations directly to states, and then the states will pass through the monies to service providers or counties, or they will be a competitive grant program. And so one of the things that we've talked about is briefing staff, particularly department directors, on these opportunities, and trying to sort of figure out, okay, where do we want to prioritize the human resources that we have for grants are not, don't come without their own burden in terms of applying for them. And so we've got to sort of do a balancing act with respect to figuring out where we want to focus those energies. But that conversation, I think, will occur early next week. Again, these dollars are coming will come quickly. This only funds the federal government through September 30th of 2019. So really the federal fiscal year 19 conversations will just continue along a pace, and hopefully they will go a little better than the federal fiscal year 18 conversation. You know, this omnibus bill is certainly a departure from regular order, which we haven't seen in Washington for a number of years with respect to budget adoption. But this particular bill is pretty remarkable.
Just a couple follow-ups on that. I can't get into specifics of what we'll propose in the budget because state law doesn't allow us to talk specifically about that until the budget is actually proposed. But we will have some proposals that address opportunities to pursue grant funding within some departments that don't currently have that capacity. So Alex referred to the human capital necessary to pursue, because there's a lot, you know, particularly for the grant work, there's you mentioned Tiger, and there's a ton of work required to do those applications. So we're going to try to address some of those things in the proposed budget. A little bit of a lag there in terms of time. We want to pursue some of these opportunities now. We have a management team on Monday, and so we'll be having a more detailed discussion with our leadership team around what departments feel we should be pursuing. And then tomorrow we'll be having a budget committee meeting, and so we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I just want to address the Secure Rural Schools funding that we're receiving. And as the board, I know, appreciates that, you know, we view that as one-time funding because there were 2 years that were approved. And so we will have a proposal in the budget for how to utilize those funds, reflecting the fact that it's not stable ongoing. We know that we have additional services we need to provide, particularly in the areas of public safety, but we really need consistent annual revenue over several years that we know is going to come before we can do those things. So I just want to sort of provide that context for particularly for other people that may be listening and saw that we received Secure Rural Schools funding. That yes, that's certainly a positive, but it was 2 years of funding, and we'll put that to beneficial use for one-time expenses, but not for ongoing operational commitments.
And just to put an exclamation point on what Steve said, you know, we didn't even become aware that SRS would be in this bill, you know, maybe 24 hours before we started to be unveiled. It was really, that's the kind of sort of lack of, planning ability or confidence that we have in seeing SRS dollars coming to Lane County, and that's been sort of the case with these omnibus bills over the last several years. Is a lot of times these are conversations that are happening behind closed doors that we're just not at all privy to, and thus it's so difficult to plan for those kinds of events. But nonetheless, the ramp down of those dollars continues, and we do see them at least for the next 2 years in the omnibus bill.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. Is there an overall sunset on this budget act? Is there is it September 30, 2019?
Chairman Bozovich,
is that a fair statement?
Sorensen, it's the federal fiscal year does end September 30th, 2018. That said, and I'm not
18.
18.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not a complete expert on how this works, but there are some commitments made into future fiscal years through the budget.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, big picture, this legislation goes way beyond September 30th, 2018, right? Doesn't it fund basically 2 years of government budget and catches us up for the delay that we've had during this fiscal year? It goes into the next fiscal year. There's not going to be another budget showdown about whether or not the government runs out of money until September 30th, 2019. I'm just trying to understand the length of time that this budget deal covers.
Well, again, this, Commissioner Sorensen, this funds the federal government through September 30th, 2018.
Okay.
So when the next budget showdown occurs, I think will probably be before then, but this year we saw delay after delay after delay. If you recall, in fact, you and I had conversations about when these continuing resolutions were going through.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if the Congress can return to regular order and get a budget bill done on time, those conversations are occurring for federal fiscal year 19 right now.
Right now. So really, the budget deal is really just covers the current fiscal year and doesn't go into the next fiscal year.
Right.
Okay. Now, on PILT, specifically, payment in lieu of taxes, that legislation, it's funded at the level of $530 million. And Lane County does not receive money from PILT?
Commissioner Bozovich, Chairman Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, we do actually receive some budget dollars through PILT. Christine knows. I don't know, Steve, if you're
asking the amount.
Yeah.
It's if it's above zero, it's not much above zero.
In the range of a few $100,000.
Okay.
To the general fund.
But the SRS, that is big money. And what is the amount of that money in the fiscal year that's covered?
It's a net. Oh, yeah. Well, the one thing we need to point out is there was no payment for 2015, I believe. So what the omnibus bill authorized, I may be off on the numbers, but I think there was no payment for 15, or maybe 15 was the last year. There was no payment for 16.
16 and 17.
And then we received payments for 17 and 18.
Okay.
So they did skip a year.
Okay.
The net number in the general fund, I think, is like $1.5 million, and we can get you the numbers, Commissioner. In the road fund, it's a larger number. We do budget the harvest in both the general fund and the road fund. The road fund harvest number is much smaller. It's in the range of like 800,000 for the harvest number.
Right.
So when we get SRS, it's much larger. It was something in the range, ballpark, don't quote me, $5 million into the road fund, and then the general fund net numbers difference between harvest and the SRS is like 1.5 million, I believe, proposed for next year.
We're obviously going to opt to receive the funds under the SRS funding and not the timber cut dollars.
Correct.
Yeah. Another question on the topic of what this legislation does not cover. The TANF what is the impact of not addressing the temporary assistance for needy families? What is there anything that is that money that goes to the states that affects poor people in our community, and what is the impact of that? And does the county receive any of those funds? Are they all administered by the state, or what's this? What does that mean? Not addressed.
Commissioner,
and F.
Chairman Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, I don't know. I noted it. I believe that those are dollars that go to the state and then are allocated downwards to the through the counties. This section here, I think, is one of the things we probably need to discuss more with staff to fully understand what the lack of addressing of these certain issues means for the county. I saw a couple of references to things that were not in the bill. High-speed rail was not in there. Waters of the U.S. rule, that's another thing that's been sort of a topic, at least at AOC. So I tried to note those, but that's too much in the weeds for me.
Yep.
I can get back to you on more information on that.
Okay, and then another thing is, what is the current debt ceiling? I got my clock up running here, and it's 21 trillion. It's going up about $1 million a second, apparently. What is the limitation on the amount of money that government can borrow to fund all this?
Chairman Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, I don't think that I think that vote comes later. Is the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling limitation? I may be wrong, but I think that's a different discussion. But I do know that they did lift these spending caps for the next 2 fiscal years, and that's why that was significant, because the previous Budget Control Act, which had the automatic sequestration, is no longer applicable.
Right. But I think one thing we should keep an eye on is the idea that the government should be reduced in size, and the amount of debt and borrowing that takes place is a bad idea. It looks like the current policy is basically increase the debt so that you can fund expensive things like this, but that the amount of the debt, which is now in excess of $20 trillion, it's still a smaller percentage of the GDP. So even though the huge debt amount is huge, it's like, $21 trillion, an unfathomable amount of money that most Americans couldn't imagine what that is. It's still a smaller percentage of the actual gross domestic product. So they appear to be just, with their tax cut and now the increase in spending, they appear to be going into more and more debt.
Chairman Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that I did want to mention is that the board will likely see in the news media there is a growing effort in Congress to rein in some of the spending that was recently passed or adopted through this measure. What I'm reading is that it is unlikely that those efforts will gain enough support to actually pass the Congress, but certainly there were a number of folks within the Congress who were absolutely unhappy with the spending levels in this bill, and there is some sort of mechanism apparently available to them where they can propose adopted budget amounts be reduced. Again, we'll probably see some of that in the media, some conversation about it in the media, but what I'm reading is that they will not have sufficient votes to actually pass those kinds of measures.
Yeah. Well, it's something that people have to keep an eye on, because with the idea that we get this big bipartisan budget package passed, and that is good news overall, it's going to have to come from somewhere. And when local officials go with their hat in their hand to Washington, D.C., asking for money, there's obviously some implications that you're either going to get the revenue or you're going to get the debt, or maybe both. Yeah, I think that they might have set aside the debt ceiling in order to pass this. I don't know if that could be a component of the current legislation.
I think it was.
So they might not even have to deal with the debt ceiling until later if they raise the debt ceiling in this legislation. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I'm going to look at our board because I think it would be worthwhile to have Alex draft letters of thank you to the entire Oregon delegation, and not just Senator Wyden-Merkley and Congressman DeFazio, but I think our entire delegation, because I think every member played a role in this. I think when you look at Congressman Walden, clearly he was really the point person with his committee on the opioid issue, and he also was responsible for the offsets on SRS. And along with, I think Senator Wyden also played a big role on the Senate side on those areas as well. But I think each member really deserves a lot of credit for, from our perspective, Lane County and the state of Oregon. I think they were very helpful in that. The other thing is, if you look at some of the actions that take place, this is one big fail swoop of making up for rural America kind of getting lost in the conversation for the last several years. And it was a big heavy lift, no doubt. But if you were to pinpoint the winners, rural America and transportation probably, and opioid probably will come out as the biggest winners of this budget. And it's interesting because Lane County is right in the middle of the conversation of all three. And so I think that if you kind of dig down, I felt like that's really where a lot of this went. So my guess is the next time they have a conversation, because of so much dollars that went into all at once on these different areas, the conversation may be different and may look different. And while it's here, especially when I was looking at the Tiger Grant process, we have spoken to Brett Garson, who said he's asked us to turn around immediately and apply for Tiger Grant on territorial now. And there's I think a real good opportunity. I think we were very, very close. We were actually what I would consider to be on the very short list to be approved. We didn't get that approval, but I think there's a real good chance now. And after our last visit at NACO, we've heard from both Congressman DeFazio and Senator Wyden that they are really going to go to bat for us on that. They're going to really push that. And so I think that there's a real opportunity. So that's just kind of the overview, and we discussed it at length yesterday at AOC, and especially the committee that I co-chair, which encompasses 5 different former committees now into one. But Mike Eliason, I think, and Doris Pinwell really broke this down nicely for what it looks like statewide. And I think you're seeing a lot of smiles from especially our rural counterparts throughout the state, that they felt like that our delegation really came through for them, and we're very, very pleased from that perspective. So no questions, but I think it is very appropriate that I would like our delegation, our entire delegation, all 7 members, to know that Lane County is very grateful for their work on this bill, and I would just ask our board to I don't know if we need an emotion on that, Mr. Chair, or just head nods. I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I think we could do it probably with head nods, and then I'm seeing 3 already here, and I count myself as 4. Something that Mr. Kyler can draft and I can sign on behalf of the board. Or,
Yep.
Thank you, letter. I don't think we need a motion for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief. One thing you pointed out, Alex, is the urgency of action. And we are poised at Lane County on a number of fronts. in no small part due to Commissioner Lyken's work for years on transportation. We're ready to move forward with the Tiger Rent and other transportation issues. Health and Human Services, we're poised and ready to move forward. So action, and I know you're going to be involved next week pretty intensely in creating the momentum, getting that action in place. So thank you for that, and we'll keep an eye on, the true success for us is what happens at the end of the day, how much really does come directly to Lane County's rural portion of America, and to the things that, once again, we are poised to take action on. Thank you.
So I'll just say I'm really pleased with some of the programs we're really concerned about, and some of our partners' programs. I mean, Homes for Good and some of the HUD funding and all that, we were really concerned about being cut back, and now we've actually seen increases in a lot of their funding. So we're going to be able to work with our partners really to improve services across the county. I will note we had some discussion yesterday in the Public Safety Committee about the increase in funding for drugs and veterans courts. One of the things we're going to have to watch out for, though, is the decrease in funding from state governments, knowing that there's increases in federal funds as we look at the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program, and making sure we get a net increase, just like when we pass ballot measures that allocate lottery funds for veterans, we don't want to see a pullback in general fund support for some of those programs. So we're going to have to be very diligent in our next budget cycle at the legislature about some of that. I did notice this National Pre-Disaster Mitigation Fund was increased significantly, and particularly for capital projects that are ready for investment. And as I think about partnerships, and we're having some great partnerships with the U of O in the last several years, their effort with the state to get our earthquake early warning system in place is one of those ready for capital investment projects that just needs money to kind of move it faster. And that's something I think as we look at the Cascadia subduction zone event that we should maybe help a sister organization, maybe even help with. And then, of course, there's multiple projects for us with bridges and buildings and everything else about getting ready. In fact, I'm kind of wondering if maybe it might even apply to some courthouse funding, seeing we're replacing a seismically unstable building. But that's neither here nor there. But that's all the more reason why I can see your meeting with the management team next Monday to try and start those conversations, because these are going to be quick on the draw, because this bill comes late in the fiscal year for the federal government, which means they're going to have to be really fast with grant programs. And that's going to stress a lot of our staff in trying to put those grants together, get the applications in, and take advantage of this bonus that we've received. So I appreciate the report. If there are any further questions for Mr. Kyler? Seeing none, then I think we'll move on to County Council announcements. And I think we've got one concerning the Territorial Sea Plan and OPAC and LUBA. So, Andy Clark, County Council.
Thank you. Yes, although not LUBA, I don't think Steve's saying that, but it's at the Court of Appeals decision.
Sorry.
Right, this is a follow-up, and I'm not super well versed in this. Steve Dingle handled most of the preliminary stuff. But my understanding, this is a follow-up to the litigation with a number of petitioners against DLCD regarding the Territorial Sea Plan, and whether that plan should have included, I guess, comments from OPAC, which stands for the Ocean Policy Advisory Council. I think the county didn't play a formal role, but was interested in supporting, I guess, the petitioners in that and the other 6 or 7 counties. But as you probably know by now, I think you've seen a copy of the decision in that the court agreed with the petitioners and the counties that the plan should have included some comments from the OPAC folk, or at least the procedures should have looked to that group and included their recommendations. what you have in front of you now and the latest is a letter of support, basically, and the latest draft of that is online. It came on late just this morning, but you can look at it now if you've got the electronics to do that. But in essence, this letter is drafted by Lincoln County Council, I want to say Rob Babette, but Wayne Belmont and Dave Allen, who was an attorney for the petitioners, not with Lincoln County, to DLCD's attorney, Stephen Shipsey, sort of talking about next steps. Where do we go from here? I think the idea is to include, as I say, the recommendations that council had made earlier. And if I'm sorry, if the DLCD isn't content with all the recommendations made before, there is a process that the letter speaks to for revision of those items, and that's under ORS 196-471. And so that's included in the letter. And again, it's a request for essentially the county to agree to support the comments in the letter by having Lane County included as one of the 7 coastal counties that's interested in playing a role in how this territorial sea plan is crafted through the OPAC. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I guess my first question would be, are you looking for a motion, or are you looking for just head nods to allow us to be listed?
I think either way, although, again, I don't know a lot of the background of this matter. Given the fact that there has been litigation, it wouldn't be a problem or out of ordinary to have a formal motion. We don't need a written motion in order, but a formal motion to have Lane County support this letter.
So for the board's education, because I sit with as a representative on the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association, I'm a little bit more familiar with this drafting the territorial sea plan. It kind of got started along, and then all of a sudden the state put a plan together without much consultation and going through the correct Goal 1 process, actually, is what kind of got skipped over. And this was just a matter of, and we actually, I don't think we formally wrote a amicus brief, but we supported the amicus brief. I think previously the board did. And it's just a matter of signing on to this letter is basically stating our desire that when the state makes decisions that are going to zone the territorial seas off the coast of Lane County, that they might want to actually consult with the local governments that might be impacted by that drafting of that plan. And that's what kind of got skipped in this process. The city of Florence, Dune City, and Lane County, none of us were really consulted. And that if we sign on to this letter, it's just kind of a reiteration of our stance that we should be consulted in that process.
And I think that's what the Court of Appeals formally found, that the committee should have been, or council should have been.
So with that kind of understanding of what we're actually asking folks to agree to us participating as being listed in the letter, is there any questions to that or motion? Commissioner Lykin.
Mr. Chair, no, I don't have questions. Just like to move approval that Lane County, is it be included or support?
Included as supporting the letter.
Okay, that Lane County be included as supporting the letter mentioned.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Lykin and seconded by Commissioner Williams to give permission for Lane County to be included as supporting the letter. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in fact, thank you for that clarification, that statement as well, because it was interesting yesterday at our Natural Resources Committee that they're talking about introducing grizzly bears back into in parts of eastern Oregon. That would also include that southeastern part of Washington. And the challenge there, they did not consult the elected officials. So the counties were unaware of this until after the fact. And so I think this makes a tremendous amount of sense that the counties be engaged through this process and that we're notified so that we can provide that comment ahead of time and we're not behind the 8 ball. So I appreciate this. And after hearing from my Eastern Oregon colleagues, they were not very pleased knowing that this is happening after the fact, and they really never had a chance to provide any sort of comment on what the potential good or bad may be. So that's why I appreciate this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
And we do not have executive session today, just for everybody's education. So that moves us on to commissioners' business announcements. Announcements from commissioners. Any announcements? Then it moves us on to agenda team and work session requests. Any agenda team or work session requests? I do want to remind folks that as we look forward, we have the budget meeting tomorrow. That's a mandatory budget meeting. It's not just an orientation. We have just scheduled a May 2nd work session at 9 a.m., which is going to be a parole and probation facilities update and tour, a work session first on their constraints and growth, and then a tour of their actual facilities as we're talking budget in that season, because one of the most pressing facilities issues for us is that department. So we've scheduled that for May 2nd. So I think Diana has sent everybody a meeting on that. And then I want to note for everybody that next week on consent calendar is our first elect to hear that's on consent. So if please look ahead at the calendar, and if you are choosing to pull that, try and let staff know in advance, not during adjustments to agenda, because that'll be a little bit more work to pull than a normal consent calendar item. So just as we change our procedures for elect to hear, to try and simplify them. There's no other agenda team request or work session request. Any other business for the board this morning? If not, I will recess the board until 1:30, where we'll reconvene and take up public works. We are recessed.